just like we did before, in the last video, we put 5 times back and then we put etc password to access the password file. What we're going to do today is we're going to try to access a file located on a different server. So if you're doing this pen test on an actual web server, then you need to store the file that you want to access needs to be stored on a place with a real IP address or with a domain name. I'm doing this on my local server, so I'm gonna store this on the web server on the Kali machine on the 10.20.14.203. This is 10.20.14.204, and I'm gonna store my file on 10.20.14.203. So that file, as I said, can be anything. It could be a web shell, it could be a payload. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm gonna create a very simple PHP file. So this is just the PHP start and end of the file. And what I'm going to put in the file, I'm going to use a function called passthrough. And in that function, basically what this function does, it executes operating system commands. So it executes Windows, Linux, or depending on the web server, it's going to execute commands related to that. So you put the command here between the 2 quotation marks. And I'm going to use the same command we used with the code execution vulnerability, which was the Netcat command, which allowed us to get a connection, a reverse connection from our target. So I'm going to paste that here. So let's just first have a look on this. So PHP and the end, these are just the start and the end of the file, of the PHP file. Passthrough is a function that I'm going to use which executes any command that's inserted between the quotations. And I'm using the same command that we used in the command execution vulnerability, which will just do a reverse connection to my computer. So this is all good. Now the next step is the most important step, and it's storing this file. So as I said, if your target was a remote web server, then you should be storing this file in a place with a real IP where you can access it from the remote web server. Now I'm going to be trying to access this from my Metasploitable machine, which is able to access files stored on the Kali machine because they're both on the same network. And I'm going to be calling this, I'm going to be storing it in my var www.html. So it's being stored on the Kali, not on the Metasploitable. And I'm going to call it reverse, and I'm going to save it as txt, not PHP. And I'm doing this, if I store it as a PHP, it's going to be executed on the Kali machine. So it's going to create a reverse connection from the Kali machine. And I don't want that. I don't want to hack the Kali machine. I actually already have access to the Kali machine. The one that I want to hack is the Metasploitable machine. And that one is stored remotely. So in order to be able to include a PHP code and execute it on the remote machine, we're going to use it as txt and get it executed on the Metasploitable machine instead of executing it on my Kali. So I'm starting it as a txt, and I'm going to save it. And now let's just see here. So if I go to my local host, and if I say reverse.txt, we'll see our file right here. So again, this is on my local host, which is not the Metasploitable machine. It's 10.20.14.203, and the Metasploitable is on 204. So how are we going to run this? First, let me just listen for connections like we did before. So it's just going to be Netcat VVLP 8080. And then right here, instead of including a file on the same server, I'm going to include a remote file, and the command is going to be HTTP. So it's just going to be the link to this file. So we can access the file here as txt. I'm going to copy it and paste it here. And also in some cases, you might need to add a question mark to the end to get this file to be executed as PHP. So I'm just going to go over this again for one more time. Including a remote file, which is on a remote server. Make sure the remote server is accessible by your target. And also make sure you store it as txt, because if you keep it as PHP, this file, the reverse file, will be executed on the remote server. So it will be executed on the 203 instead of being executed on the 204. and I'm keeping it as txt. This way it's going to be executed on the 204, and it's going to give me a remote connection to this computer, to the metasploitable computer. So if I come back here, as you can see, we have a remote connection. If we do a uname A, you'll see that this is the metasploitable machine, not the Kali machine. So we basically have full access to the metasploitable machine through a remote file inclusion vulnerability. Now, if we do an ls, we can do a pwd to see where we are, and we can literally run any Linux command we want now on the machine and do anything we want. Basically, we have full access to that machine.